You're tuned to the Pacific service of Radio New Zealand International. We'll be off the air now for about 30 seconds for an aerial change. When we come back, we'll be beaming our signal to listeners in Australia, Bougainville, the Solomon Islands and Timor. Please stay tuned.
That was Tariq Chikawi, the author of The News Media at War, The Clash of Western and Arab Networks in the Middle East, talking there to Media Watch's Jeremy Rose. And you can hear more of Jeremy's chat with Tariq Chikawi in the extended version of that interview. You'll find it on the Media Watch page of the Radio New Zealand website, rnz.co.nz. But for now, that's all we have for you on Media Watch this weekend. But join us again for more on the media next weekend at the same time next Sunday, here on RNZ National.
Media Watch, of course, was presented and produced by Colin Peacock and Jeremy Rose, and it's available on the Media Watch page of our website, rnz.co.nz, and you can send your thoughts and suggestions, all welcome, to the Media Watch team. Email is mediawatch@rnz.co.nz, or you can write it on paper, pen, Media Watch, PO Box 123 in Wellington. We're not too far away from the house, but first, Jeb Loy Nichols with The Quiet Life.
That's the life I live, the quiet life. That's all I need, quiet life. It's so quiet you can hear the falling of a tears that surely near. Oh, the quiet life, oh, the quiet life, the quiet life. Each and every day, it's just the since you went away, it's a quiet life. Finally got the time to live a life on my own. I'm so happy that I'm living the quiet life. Oh, the quiet life, the quiet life.
Enjoyable time on Sunday evening. RNZ National 17 to 11. Now it's time for a look at the machinery and processes of Parliament.
Kia ora, welcome to the House. I'm Phil Smith. Select committees are sometimes called the workhorse of Parliament. The metaphor is meant to suggest that they get a lot of the work done, while the debating chamber is the show pony getting all the attention. Normally, committees examine legislation, hold inquiries and hear evidence on petitions, but they're also a place where Parliament looks at government's finances. And when a new budget is announced, each minister must face up to a committee to answer questions about her part of it. There's been a lot of that happening over the last 2 weeks. To find out how it works, we chatted with a committee chairperson, a committee member and a minister. Daniela Mawate Cox asked Minister of Education Nikki Kay what it's like fronting up to a select committee.
Sometimes in the House, you sort of are a bit more political and there's quite a robust debate that occurs. I think at select committee, particularly in the scrutiny of the estimates, my approach has always been to recognise that the opposition are doing their job, and that actually my job is to ensure they get the information that they need to be able to scrutinise the executive.
So how did you find it last week in the committee?
I found it really good, actually. I mean, I think, again, I'm really keen on the contest of ideas, and I'm very respectful of the role of the opposition in terms of scrutiny, particularly around the vote. And I think that there were a range of discussions that were very helpful, and I agreed to give further information. We had a good discussion covering areas like special education, metro schools. So I thought it was good.
And look, I'll even put my hand on my heart and be fair to the current government and say this is not a new issue. This has happened for a long time. Because whatever model the government of the day uses to forecast and plan for growth seems to always be one step behind where the schools actually are. So why can't we come up with a better model so that we're actually getting ahead of that rather than the schools constantly playing catch up? I mean, I've been to those schools where they're in libraries and dental clinics and stuff, and it's just not a positive learning space for those kids to be in.
So do you mind if I just take a moment to set out a picture and also agree with you on a couple of points? So if you look at
is that usually the case? Are they always that sort of...
Well, no. I mean, I'm aware of other ministers that may have had a different experience, and I think it requires leadership from both the opposition and the government to have that respectful process. And I think that, a big part of it is I could have been asked anywhere from several hundred questions in terms of information, and sort of accepting that there is an amount of detail that I need to be across, but also there's a role for officials to provide certain detail. And I think when you realise that and you have that respectful relationship, then the environment's going to be a lot easier, because you've both got the same expectations about what I can actually give at that time.
Do you find that this process, talking to a select committee where you've got a mixture of MPs and you've got opposition MPs who have a particular interest in this subject, do you find it useful to hear what they have to say?
Yes, I do. I mean, look, I think one of the beautiful things about New Zealand is MMP. I think that, when we had FPP, you didn't have the contest of ideas that you now have. I have huge respect for the opposition, and I listen to their ideas.
What's the point of you turning up to a select committee and fronting up and taking these questions?
Well, I think it is that question of accountability. So in like education, we've got an $11.6 billion vote, and it's the opposition's chance to not only hear from me personally, but also other key officials about why we've chosen to spend money in certain areas and not in other areas. And also, it tends to not just be about the vote. There are other issues that are raised. So it's a key part of the accountability process of the executive.
Do you get much out of the process?
Yes, I did. I mean, I think there are a couple of things that I got out of it. Firstly, it required a level of discipline from my perspective early into the role, to be across a level of detail that potentially, if I hadn't been having that timing of committee, I could have had longer, but it made me go and study hard. The second thing is I genuinely think there's a range of areas where they don't need to be political. They can be absolutely cross-party, and I got a bit of a sense of that from some of the committee members. And I think the third thing is going through the process, there are areas where it makes you think, should I actually be spending a little bit more time on that particular area? So I found it very useful.
Is there anything else that you think people should know about this process?
Yeah, I think that people should have confidence in our political system, and that select committees, in my view, do a great job. They do quite a bit of heavy lifting around, obviously, legislation, but also sometimes they have inquiries, and they produce some great work. And I wish that more New Zealanders saw that work, because I think they also would see more cross-party approaches that occur at the select committee level, and I think it's a really important part of our system.
When you talk about the committee holding government to account, this is one of the places where they can do that. Do you think that the MPs from your own party do enough to push the ministers, or should they be more tough, or are they balanced well enough?
Well, it just varies. I mean, it varies as well in terms of MPs' interests. So my experience is when it comes to local issues, MPs will be a bit tougher on the minister because it's their job. They might be of the same party and we might go and sit in the ground certain policies. They're quite capable of being quite tough when it comes to local issues.
So it can depend on what their
interest and their interest. And it might be that they feel strongly about a particular area. Just depends on the MP.
Sitting here with Julianne Genter, Green MP, and Simon O'Connor, National MP. Simon, you're the chairman of the Health Committee, and Julianne, you are a member of that committee. This week, you both were in committee questioning the Minister of Health as he faced up to your committee and defended his budget for this year. How is that different from everything else you do?
Look, this is one of the set pieces and a singular set piece for the parliamentary year where a minister actually fronts a committee. Most of what the committee does in other times of the year is look at petitions and pieces of legislation which doesn't involve a minister. So this is the singular opportunity for members, in this case of the Health Select Committee, to question, grill, critique what a minister's doing.
Julianne, you were questioning a minister in question time just this afternoon, and yesterday you were questioning a minister in Select Committee. How were they different from each other?
The advantage in Select Committee is we get a little bit more freedom to ask more questions. It's not so limited. So in parliamentary question time, we get a set number of questions. It's not a free-form discussion. We get a primary, we get a set number of supplementary questions. And we have to address the minister through the chair. So it's very formal. In Select Committee, when we get to question the minister for the estimates, we have a certain amount of time allowed, but it depends on the chair of the Select Committee how much time is allowed, and we have more of a free-form discussion with the minister.
I notice in Select Committee too, I mean, you may start off a topic, but then you can almost tag team it with other members, whether they be government members or opposition members. They might pick up your question and run with it and take it somewhere else as well.
That's right. It depends on the chair of the Select Committee how that's run. I have been on other Select Committees where the chair was very strict and wouldn't allow supplementary questions from other members on one issue. I think it works much better when they do allow other members to chip in with supplementary questions so we can deal with one topic at a time.
Yesterday in committee, for example, there was a fight, basically, that was happening between an opposition member and the Minister of Health. And it wasn't really getting anywhere very fast, but you were able to come and tag in on that and actually ask a succinct and clear, specific question, for the answer that everyone wanted.
I think what many people don't realise is that Select Committees are meant to be a creature of Parliament, not the executive. And so really they have an important role both in scrutinising the legislation of the executive and holding the executive to account. I know we often think that's the role of the opposition parties, but in fact parliamentary select committees are meant to do that as well. Now, to be totally frank, I think that under this national government that has become less the case. I think some parliamentary select committees are run in a way that's more to defend the government of the day rather than to help Parliament truly scrutinise what they're doing. But it depends on the chair to a certain extent.
You're a chairman of the select committee. How do you see your role? What is your primary purpose?
Primary purpose is to manage the time. In many ways is to make sure that we first and foremost get through all the items of business that we have to consider, from bills to petitions to inquiries, but then meeting by meeting to make sure that everyone where possible gets their say, that you try to give a proportionate number of questions to each person in each party, which is why, say, the Greens would get more than New Zealand First, but probably a little less than Labour. So sort of trying to manage the process, and then that sort of how do you allow political discussion to carry on and have a little bit of theatre and angst at times, but know also when to stop that and allow a fresh question to come in and actually move things forward?
I think we would know that select committees are really working in the way intended when we start seeing government members of the select committees ask more probing questions than just patsy questions, and that also would be quite a departure from what happens at parliamentary question time, where all of the government members' questions are essentially patsy questions. In theory, government members should be able to question the minister, and particularly on behalf of their own constituents.
It's a very tricky thing, isn't it, that you're a member of the National Party, and yet you're not part of the executive. You're not actually... You're in the governing party, but you're not part of government. You're part of Parliament, which must be kind of weird. Do you feel that you are able to question the minister or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, as you say, as a non-executive member, I'm an MP, and my duty is to act as a parliamentarian to reflect my constituents. But you do that wearing a number of hats. So, yep, you're a local MP, you're a member, in this case, of the National Party, you're part of a team. So, yeah, you can question ministers if you want, but a lot of times government MPs will try to highlight the positives just in the same way that the opposition will try to show what's wrong. It's rare for an opposition MP to say to a minister, hey, you're doing a fantastic job, keep it going. I suppose the important thing is there's multiple avenues in Parliament where we can speak to ministers and raise concerns.
Would it be kind of slightly career defining though? I mean, if you said, look, Minister, actually, I think that's wrong, I think that's silly, I think you should act differently, you'd get in trouble.
Well, yes and no. I think in many ways it's how you choose to approach things. I can certainly think of times in my career here where I've been able to ask a question in a way that is constructive and not seen as sort of a direct challenge. But I think part of it too, if I put on the chairman's hat, is to make sure that the opposition get a good amount of time. The estimate process is a big moment for them to really challenge. And speaking to the Health Committee yesterday, they got the majority of the time in question. So that's sort of an acknowledgement, at least from my side as chair, that they've got an important role to play.
Did you find the experience this week useful and satisfying?
To be honest, it depends on the minister, and I found most of the hearings that I was in this week pretty frustrating because I felt that the ministers were dodging the questions, dodging the issue, and it was very hard to follow up with it in the limited time that we have available. Obviously, we don't just want to have an argument. It doesn't need to be unfriendly. It doesn't need to be combative. But I think that having a proper debate where we test the answers being given by the minister is an important part of democracy. It's an important part of how we come to conclusions about what policies we're going to implement. We need to be tested, and we need to find ways of doing that doesn't result in animosity.
It does appear to be a committee that actually does seem to work in a very positive and cooperative manner. Am I right in thinking that?
I think the Health Select Committee in particular is making a really positive contribution. I wouldn't be surprised if the fact that it's female-dominated and we have such a fantastic chair contributes to it being a very constructive committee.
So there you go. The opposition can compliment the government occasionally, or members thereof. Your take on the same thing?
Yeah, I think it is. A little bit like Julianne. I sat on various committees, and some you're just at each other's throats from day one, for sometimes reasons which are not understood. And as Julianne pointed out,
You're tuned to the Pacific service of Radio New Zealand International. We'll be off the air now for about 30 seconds for an aerial change. When we come back, we'll be beaming our signal to listeners in Australia, Bougainville, the Solomon Islands and Timor. Please stay tuned.